What is up, guys? Today I want to talk to you guys about this whole concept of the baton is being passed from America to, I would say, China. And this sort of concept comes from four big gurus that have sort of mentioned that this is sort of occurring. The first one is Charlie Munger, who recently, in a discussion given at a university, mentions how the baton is being passed like so many times in the past. And he is referring to how certain prominent or elite nations have had their golden ages pass by, and they have had to sort of rescind and let new nations flourish. And he mentions nations and countries such as United Kingdom, England, Rome, and so forth, where they've had their sort of golden age, one could argue, and now they've had to pass their baton on. And he's saying how America's time has sort of come. Other people, like Warren Buffett, who has said something similar, he said that if he could start over again nowadays, he would invest globally, and that would be the big prominent difference that he makes now. For him, it's a little more confusing because he still has a lot of faith in America and how well it will do in its future in the long run. So it's kind of confusing as to what exactly he thinks about China or other sort of nations like that. However, he has expressed that our current path in terms of spending more money than we earn or produce will cause dramatic problems in the future in terms of debt and in terms of ownership of American products and plants and resources. Sure, even if we do make a lot of money, if it's not owned by the US anymore, a lot of companies you think are owned by the US are actually not. That could be a problem. And then there's also Kevin O'Leary, who's a investor. He's a venture capitalist amongst other activities. He's on a show called Shark Tank. He did a talk with a group of business students for about an hour as well. By the way, if you want to watch all these videos, I found them all on YouTube as well. He has also mentioned the same exact thing. In his examples, however, he stresses how basically globally there's so many nations out there who are growing at a much faster GDP rate and GNP rate than the United States now. And he mentions how if he could do it all over again himself, he would fly off to a South American country and land there and start there. Now, obviously, what does this actually mean? Is this truly applicable to American students that he's, telling this to, because they only speak English, and the time it would take to learn Spanish or another language to a just mediocre degree, even if you could hire a translator, would that really be reasonable? Because there's so many intricate things about the culture and details of how different nations work that truly a native would have to know, and you could be tricked completely in a different land. Obviously, there's the legal consequences and legal differences of different nations, especially something like Asian countries, where their legal system is completely different, and bribery, trickery, and all these unscrupulous dealings in these public companies, which do not occur in United States, will occur. And so companies that you would assess to be safe may not be safe. Or even creating your own companies, from what I've heard, it's very much tougher in something like China, just because you have to deal with a lot more bribery, trickery, scams, scandals, and just very greedy, traitorous people running these companies. And they can get away with a lot of this because of the legal system, which is different or new or just still developing. And that's one thing that's considered. The final guy is Jim Rogers, who's also very, very wealthy. I think he has, hundreds of millions in net worth, if not 1 or 2 billion. He's also a investor, although retired. Recently, he did an interview with London Real, which is a YouTube channel. I would say very, very recently in this current year. And basically, he's constantly stressing about how, China's growing dramatically. That's where all the action is. He's saying how, in a lot of ways, a lot of the things you have to process through in America or California specifically, it's a lot faster and quicker to get done in China. And he says, actually doing business there, you would need a native at the very least, because if you don't know the difference between Beijing and Shanghai, you won't have a chance. And he talks more about how there's so much, like Mandarin is essential to flourishing in business. And he mentions how his own children are being educated in China now, or maybe not China, I think Philippines, in some sort of Southeast Asian country. And he's talking about how the education system is ridiculous in these Asian countries, and they're learning 10 times as much in 1 year as an American does. And I can't deny that the fact that America's education system isn't ranked anywhere near the highest anymore. And in terms of, I would say, I think it was, national, it was trade expenditures, trade deficits versus trade surpluses. The United States is towards the bottom of all countries versus certain Asian countries which are at the top. They have trade surpluses, which is kind of scary in a way, but we'll let the politicians figure that out, and the business people. I don't really know too much about that, but it is kind of scary when you realize that the American system, its education isn't at the top, and it's pretty much spending a lot more than it's making or producing, and that's pretty much going to end to a lot of debt in the future or a lot of problems in the future. And is this all gloom and doom though? I don't think so though. Why? Because first off, just from my humble opinion as this, typical average dude who doesn't really know much about this other than what I've just explained, I would have to say, first off, despite the education system being bad, I think America still has a great system. And I see that because I still see many Chinese immigrants traveling here to get their education. Whether they arrive here in high school or middle school or college, they're still coming here. And it's not because of the education system. Oftentimes, when you see them come here from high school or younger, they always scoff at the math that is being taught here because it's so simplistic and so slow. The pace is just so slow. They're most likely coming here because of the whole package. America as a system just provides a better opportunity for a better life in terms of getting a more reputable degree or a higher income, a healthier lifestyle, and so forth. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of people who do fly here from Asian countries to get their education have plans of going back but at the same time, they still choose to come here for their education. Mark Cuban, who's also in Shark Tank, in an interview also mentions that. He says how it won't be all gloom and doom until people of other foreign countries choose not to come here for their educations. And I think it is true in a lot of ways. A lot of Asians, despite either deciding to return in the future or just haven't decided, I have seen them come here and then decide to stay here, or at least currently they've decided to stay, they've settled down, they've married, they've had children here, and as far as I can tell, they have decided to settle down even though they were born in a different land. And so a lot of these people have decided to become a part of the American economy, because like you're not getting a good income here or getting a reputable degree is just a lot better in a lot of ways. So I still have a lot of faith in the American system. And look at England. I mean, just because their baton has passed doesn't mean that they crumble as a nation. They've just sort of, their growth has ended, and they've sort of just aged to that point of that nation that's, for lack of a better term, this fat old man who has stopped growing and flourishing at such a degree. But he's still there. It's still doing pretty well. It's just not, the top dog anymore. And then for that matter too, I don't think that, again, this is just my, humble, stupid opinion, but as far as technology goes, I don't think that we're gonna, stop being at the forefront of it. At least not right away. We're not just gonna drop off the charts. And think about it. All the big technological advances that have changed the world have come from American inventors. The internet, the automobile, electricity, indoor plumbing, the light bulb, computers, software, computer programming, what else? iOS, the iPhone, which is actually what I'm using to record this video, Apple, all these big things, the locomotive train, the metro. A lot of these things have come from American inventors. And obviously, as we've seen with automobiles, who initiates the invention doesn't always, end up dominating the field. And now we have a lot of, the majority, foreign automobile industries who are dominating. But still, like, we're still the ones putting out the stuff, and oftentimes a large portion of the industry is still American made and owned. Apple is a huge example. It is one of the biggest companies in terms of market cap that exists nowadays, and yet, I don't think that it will, fall flat anytime too soon. And on top of that, it also will not just disappear or, relinquish its ownership or be outcompeted by any sort of Chinese brand anytime soon. And so although I think China in the long run will flourish as well, and again, this is just my stupid opinion, because I honestly, in comparison to most of these gurus, know so little about the topic. From what I've heard, they're probably just knocking off a lot of products that Americans make, such as a lot of things like smartphones. They're knocking off and copying a lot of devices or products, whether it's certain backpacks or certain types of shoes. They're pretty much knocking off, like Crocs, which were a recent fad. They're knocking off, copying, and reproducing those sort of anything that isn't proprietary to a degree where they can't easily copy. So they can't really copy iPhones well because it's complex. the iOS device, the whole system is, you can't just copy it. But there's so many things like Microsoft, or shoes or commodity products, or anything that really has no proprietary value, like those digital devices that just flip through and show your photos. It's like a digital photo album that you can put on a table. That has no brand value really. So those things are just easily copied in China, and they're flourishing because of it. And I would say that China's it's a very peculiar, strange, new sort of system, because despite how behind it was, it is just galloping in terms of growth, and all these new things are being introduced at new intervals that America did not have for a while. It took years of growth and invention to come up with these things, but in China they're just like grabbing them and stealing them from developed countries and using them, and it's at a rapid rate. And so I really don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think that America is just going to up and die, nor is it going to fall behind too much. Is it going to be top dog like it was in the last century? I don't think so, but I definitely do think that a lot of these inventions and revolutions out there, at least in the technological front, are still going to be out there. But as a whole, in terms of the economy, in terms of trade deficits and trade surpluses, whether or not those are really good or bad, like one could argue a deficit's really not that bad, we'll let the economists decide that sort of stuff. Like, I really don't know. China's going to do well, but again, it could be very slippery, and it could be very well entrenched and interconnected with America, just as America is sort of interconnected with China. Ever since middle school, which was roughly almost 10 years ago for me, from middle school, I was hearing people, teachers and students, just make comments about stuff like, yeah, we are so screwed because we owe so much to China. If they decide to do anything, we are so screwed. I heard this since, like, I would say high school, towards the end of middle school. Is that really true? I don't know, because the 2007/8 financial crisis, I mean, China was definitely very intertwined with America in terms of how much that affected their economy as well. So they themselves were, very well hoping that America did not go down. So at the same time, although we are very intertwined with China, they are as well with us. So it's interesting to see what happens, and no doubt we're going to have some event eventually in the future that's going to be some sort of decline. Whether it's the same thing, it's probably not going to be the same way. It's most definitely not going to happen the same way as the Depression or the 2007 financial crisis, or 2008, 2009 financial crisis. But according to Warren, and I believe Warren, it's going to happen. Will that really affect us? Who knows? But yeah, I definitely want some more info on it, and I'm a little confused as to where to find more info about this. Real good information about this, and how as a young person I can use this to my advantage, whether it's just knowing more about this or in terms of business. But again, I don't know. And China's a place where, although a lot of it's growing, a lot of it is still far behind the US. Like, there's still people who are living very poor, and it's a very strange thing. All I do have to say though is Jim Rogers says a lot of stuff about China, how Mandarin is, one of the best languages to learn. I have to say that I am very lucky, although I don't know how exactly. In terms of finance, it really will be useful, because I'm not going to be starting a business in China anytime soon or considering it. Nor do I think that knowing Mandarin will help me unless I start a business in China or move to China. But I think, you know, as Warren said, being born in the United States is one of the luckiest things. The more recently you were born in the United States, the more lucky you are, because of how amazing a system and prosperous it is as a country. And so I guess, you know, all I can say is I think I'm very lucky to be born here, because my dad was one of like a dozen brothers and sisters who decided to come here, and he became one of the most prosperous of his siblings because of that. And it's funny because his mother and father, my grandparents, were also very lucky to have been in the top 1% of their area in terms of prosperity, in terms of how rich they were. Were they millionaires? Were they super rich? No. But compared to the 99% of people they live with, they were rich. Compared to the typical American's lifestyle nowadays, they weren't that rich, or they weren't as prosperous, or they probably didn't live as well. And so that's just something to think about, because if you're an average American, or even less than average American, you're probably living really well compared to just a lot of people in general, just because of how much economies are growing every single day, or every single year, or every single 10 years. The average person today is living much better than the best people 100 years ago. And that is a scary and amazing thing that you should be grateful for. I hope this video made you think, and if it did, please share it with someone you think would be influenced by it and would like it. And as always, if you like these sort of videos, leave a comment and hit the subscribe button. It's free. It will notify you when I upload new videos. And this is just my layman's / humble average citizen's opinion. Well, I don't know about average citizen. Most people don't know about it as much as me. But that's just my opinion on the topic, and I'm excited to see where it will go from here. See you guys later. Thanks for watching.